It looks like we're waiting for one more member of the council, advisory council to join us. Okay, let's see. It is now a little bit after 3, and I see we have most everyone here. So my name is Randy Nishimura, and I'm a member of the Reapportionment Commission, and I was asked to act as a liaison between the Kauai Niihau Island Advisory Council and the full commission. And I agreed to do that. And what I'd like to do is just get this started by calling the meeting to order. Before we do that, we have some housekeeping items. For members of the advisory council, Mina, Chris, and Laurie, we have to have you turn on your cameras. It is a requirement of the Sunshine Law and the governor's executive order. We can have these Zoom meetings, but we are required to have you on camera.
Okay, I apologize, but I double booked, and so I'm sitting and getting my hair done at the same time. That's why I didn't have my camera on, but hey, you'll see what it looks like when my hair is being done.
That's what I call dedication, Laurie. Thank you.
I was like, oh
Uh,
my God, I double booked myself, but
Yeah.
yeah, anyway.
With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll have a roll call. Commissioner Yoshida,
Here,
Commissioner Nii.
Here.
And Commissioner Morita.
here,
Do we have Commissioner Kusaka in the house? Okay. That being said, we do have a quorum. And the first order of business would be to approve the agenda as it was distributed.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
second,
Is moved and seconded to approve the agenda as distributed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. At this time, we'll begin the election of the advisory council chairperson. To make it simple. Any volunteers? If not,
Mina, why don't
board-
you do it, Mina?
All right, I will.
Okay. Just in keeping with Robert's rules, I heard a nomination by Laurie.
Yes,
Second.
That was
second by
quick, Chris.
Nee. All those in favor?
I,
Oppose? Okay, Mina, at this time, part of the rules is that the advisory council has to provide minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
And you can either elect one or you can assign one since they made you chair.
Do I have any volunteers to take the minutes of the meeting?
Chris, can you do it? Mostly because I'm sitting in a chair getting my hair colored.
Hairstylist nominate you, Laurie.
I know, but I'm getting my hair colored. I'm sitting in a chair.
I will book them. Yeah, I can take the notes, it's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, and Chris, I'll go over the notes with you too, and I know that it's being recorded, so hopefully it'll be a simple task. So Chris shall take the minutes of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the redistricting website demonstration by the reapportionment staff. So we can
I
proceed
don't-
with that.
Yes, I don't know if David or Royce will be doing that, but I'll let them take it away.
Yeah, I'm David Rosenbrock. I'm the project manager for reapportionment. This is my third reapportionment. And I'm like I said, the project manager. So I'll be answering program questions, and Royce is our technical consultant. And he'll be answering any technical questions. We have just a quick overview before we get into the grueling part of how to make a plan and all that. So we'll start with this initial presentation and we'll kind of go from there.
Aloha. Today, we're going to talk about Hawaii Redistricting Online. This is the online set of data and tools that the Hawaii Reapportionment Commission will be using for redistricting, and it's also available for the advisory councils and the public to use if they want to try and create their own redistricting plans and submit them to the commission. So we have a couple of videos that we'll be using statewide, but before we jump into those, since this is the Kauai Advisory Council, we thought we'd look at some Kauai maps before we get into the online tools themselves. So let's go look and see what's involved here on Kauai. We see, first of all, the total. This is the 2020 permanent resident population of the Kauai Basic Island Unit, 72,997. So with 3 House districts, the average then, the ideal population, if we had exactly equal representation amongst all the districts, would be 24,332 people in each district. The map below shows the current district boundaries with the 2020 population factored in, and looking then at the population and how much above and below that ideal average each district is. So if we look at these numbers, we look up on the north here, Kilauea, Anahola, Princeville, it's actually very close to no deviation, 55 people below that ideal average, or minus 0.23%. So that's looking pretty good. As we move around the island down here in Niue, we see House 15 has actually grown more relative to the other areas and has 592 people more than that ideal average, or 2.43%. And then continuing around the island, Waimea, Kekaha, Kalaheo, and Ni'ihau, House 16, it is below by 536, or minus 2.2%. So as we're looking at plans, ideally a plan's overall deviation, in other words, the difference between the highest and the lowest, is below 10%. And if we look here at Kauai, interestingly, even with the current boundaries making no changes, the overall plan deviation is 4.64%. So one option would be to make no changes whatsoever. And it's still below the 10% deviation, but it could be made better. You could get those deviations down, get better, more equal representation by making some adjustments. And that's what the redistricting online tools are for, is assigning census blocks to specific districts to better balance the population. And indeed, when we go into the online application, I'll show you a little snippet here from the district window. You'll see those same numbers because it is using the online application, the same ideal target. And it will show you then for each of the districts, the deviation percent, the absolute numbers of deviation, and the total population. And this is where we'll be showing you the tools that you can use as you start assigning census blocks to different districts. You'll see those numbers change. So how would you get started? There are templates. And for Kauai, there's 2 of them, the Kauai State House blank, which no districts have assigned, usually not so useful, particularly in the case of Kauai, where there's not going to be that much change needed. Most often people start with the current boundaries, and that's what I've selected here. And this, as you start working with Hawaii Redistricting Online, you'll have these templates to choose from. So in this case, I'm going to choose the Kauai State House with the current boundaries as my template to get started. And this is the map we'll see and the district window. And that's where in the videos, we're going to talk more about then the tools for making those changes. Where would you make them? Well, given that the difference is house 15 and 16, I'm going to go back for just a second. 14 was pretty close, right? So 15 and 16, 15 is above the average, 16 is below, which means some population that's currently assigned to 15, some census blocks need to instead be assigned to 16 to better balance this out. So you know, Kauai, if you're looking at that boundary between house 16 and 15, you know there's not a lot of areas where you can make changes. But this would be an area where you can, right? So the area around Levi, I'll zoom in a little bit more. And if you are going to work in this area, want to zoom in where you can see now each of the different census blocks and the population within those census blocks. So the light black outlines outline the census blocks, and the numbers inside show the population within each census block. So in the following two videos, the first one, the video tutorial was created about a month ago. It uses the congressional boundaries because that's all we had at that time as an introduction to the Hawaii Redistricting Online. And then there's a second video where we go more into the learning resources, the click lists, some updated information. These were just created a few days ago, the second video and these click lists, just to help give more learning resources for you to use the online application. So with that, we're going to pause here, see if there's any questions, and then we'll go ahead and start the next video.
Okay, any questions? No, okay, let's continue.
So this is Royce. I made the presentation, so that's where I put the Kauai ones up front so you could see the data that you're working with. So the following two videos really are how to use the online application. Each one's about 25 minutes. As I mentioned before, the first one uses the congressional districts as the example on how to use the tools. So that's where we want to start. And then we'll stop after that, see if there's any additional questions. And then the second one is more up-to-date information because the site is being updated. There's more information there. And we've got that in the second video, which is also about 25 minutes. They are all online, so anyone can go anytime. They're on the reapportionment website. But right now we're doing it. So after you watch it, you may have some questions. David and I will both be here to address any questions you might have. Is that good?
Yep.
So David, can you cue that up? Aloha. Hawaii Redistricting Online is an online application that will be used by the Hawaii Reapportionment Commission to redistrict the Hawaii seats, the congressional seats in the U.S. House, the Hawaii State Senate, and Hawaii State House districts. This set of tools and data are available for the commission, members of the advisory council, members of the general public, a set of data and tools to draw redistricting plans. This video is intended for anyone wishing to use the application. It'll step through how to get a user account because it does require a login, how to then use plan templates and open a plan, how to use the map window and district windows, and the biggest one, how to assign census blocks to districts, because that's what redistricting is about, assigning census blocks to the different legislative districts. And then we'll also talk about sharing your plan, reviewing your plan, And if you like your plan and would like to submit it to the commission for its consideration, we'll talk about how to submit your plan. So first, what does it look like when you come to the app? You will see a sign to sign in. If it's your first time, you'll need to create a new account. If you're returning, you can use that account information you've created to log in. But to get started, I'll show you how to create a new account. So you'll click here, create a new account, which will open up a window. I'm going to enlarge it so you can see it a little better and fill it in. So here you'll put in your name, email address. You'll create a username and a password. These are ones that you know that you make up. And then you'll click the create button. You'll see the OK if the account is successful. If someone else already has that username, you'll be prompted to change your username. But if everything goes fine, you'll see user account successfully created. You can click the OK button. At that point, the app will log you in. This is managed by Esri. The software, or the online application software, was created by Esri, and the Office of Elections has supported the commission here in this. And so when you're signing in to use the online application, you're actually signing in to this Office of Elections and Esri website. So you'll put in the username and password that you just created, and then click sign in. The first time you do this, you'll be prompted for a security question and answer. Just like in other online applications, there's a variety of choices for the security question. Choose the question of your choice and provide an answer. Once you've done that, go ahead, click the OK button. Once again, this is an application with Esri and Office of Elections, and it wants to make sure you're going to sign in to this application using your user account, and you click yes, allow. There's the usual agreements, licensing agreements. Read through the whole thing if you want. If you want to use the app, go down and click agree. And that opens the application, at which point you see a choice of template plans. At this point, we have two template plans to choose from. They're both for the congressional, a blank plan where none of the census blocks have been assigned to any census district, neither of the two Hawaii congressional districts. The second plan is the current plan. So we've taken the current district boundaries for districts 1 and 2 and assigned all census blocks to whatever their current boundary is. So that's the plan we're going to go ahead and open. That's the only two we have right now. But we do in the future, right now, we anticipate September 10th. We should have then the template plans for the state Senate and state House by basic island unit. So similar to what you'll see today for the congressional, you'll be able to start, if you're interested more in doing state Senate on Maui, say, you could go in and choose one of those templates and start working on your own plan. And the difference between blank and current, a lot of times people have found in the past, and when I've worked with past commissions, that it's easier to start from the current districts and adjust them than to start from blank. But you have both choices and you can choose whichever you want. Also looking to the future, at some point, the commission will propose a set of plans that will go out for public hearing. At the time that happens, those proposed plans will also become available in Hawaii Redistricting Online. And there again, past experiences show this is where we get the most use of the online application. Once the commission has proposed a plan, members of the public go in and start with one of those proposed plans and then start suggesting other changes that they'd like to see the commission make. At any rate, right now there's only two to get started, congressional, and we're going to go ahead and use the current because again, that's the one that I think most people find most useful. Starting from the current district, so I'll select that template current and click the OK button. When I do that, then the application itself opens. We see a map, we see some district information down below. We see a set of tools, so there's different tabs as we go. This is the File tab with a set of tools on it. The one we'll use first is the save as when we want to take a plan and save it as our own. You also in the future might use save as you're making changes. You'll want to save those changes. And you may also want to use open. You may have multiple plans you're working with. You want to save one, open another. So this file tab is one you use for managing the plans that you have. There is a learn tab with some help on how to use the application. Again, we've created this video for people in Hawaii, but Esri does have very extensive help online for all the different tools, and you'll have access to that from this Learn tab. The next tab is the View tab. So this is an important one because this is where you can configure what you're going to see in the map window and also what you're going to see in the districts window. So we see right now our district boundary, CD1, Congressional District 1, is most of Southern Oahu. Congressional District 2 is the rest of Oahu and the other basic island units in Hawaii. The plan itself zooms into the area where there actually is a boundary where we might be making changes. Now, again, you can move to other areas and propose other changes, but the starting point, this is the current district boundary. And so one thing I find quite useful right away in this view window, I like to see my target because this is based on the 2020 census information, the federal population base, the PL 94-171 data. And the ideal population would be if each of these two districts had 727,636 people. Using the 2020 data, in the total, it shows us how many are actually in each district. Again, based on that 2020, you can see how it has changed now. They've grown to where there's 2,000 additional people in Congressional District 1 and 2,000 fewer in Congressional District 2, meaning Congressional District 1 has grown slightly faster than Congressional District 2. So showing the target values is something I find handy to do. I like to see those down in the districts window. You don't have to do it, but it's something I find useful. So I pointed it out to you. The other one down in the districts window is to look at your total deviation is the difference between the largest and the smallest. So here we see for the existing current district boundaries with the 2020 population, we have a total deviation of 0.6%, the difference between the highest and the lowest. Now, interestingly, that's lower than the 1% threshold that courts have upheld for a federal plan. So in theory, no changes need to be made, but in practice, generally, we try to get those as low as possible. And so that's what we're going to do in this exercise. I'm just going to try some things, try some census blocks, and I'm going to show you how the tools work to see if we can get that deviation down below 0.6%. Interesting to compare, this was the plan from 10 years ago, the congressional plan at that time, based on the population at that time. The ideal was 608,151, quite a bit below, right? Our new target is higher because we've had population growth, but they did get their planned deviation down to 0.1%. So ours is 0.6%. We're quite a ways above that. So let's see if we can get that down a little bit. And in doing so, I'll share with you some of the different tools available in Hawaii Redistricting Online. And that moves us to the Create tab. This is the main tab where we can change district assignments, move around on our map, do different things. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time here on the Create tab and the different tools on the Create tab. So first is the map window itself and a set of tools for managing the map window. There is a little hand there, that's the pan tool. So if you have that as your active tool, and you can see the little orange halo around it, little box around it shows that it's active, and you click and drag on your map, you can move the map around. So you want to see an area a little bit north or south, east, west, Makamakai, you can use that pan and drag your map to different areas. So that's a useful tool. Another one that's useful is this zoom tool. If I make that the active tool, I can go down on my map and click an area to zoom in to. So here you can see down in the map, I've drawn a little red box. I'm using this zoom tool to zoom in to that area I've identified in the red box because I'm looking at seeing if there's changes we can make in the Ko'olina area to just slightly change this boundary and bring our deviations down. So I go ahead and click that box and you can see it zooms my map window to the extent of that box. So now we can see more closely that boundary between CD1 and CD2. The other thing we see is now we can see the outlines of the block boundaries. I'm going to go back a minute. If you look in the tools in the red box up above, it says display level block. That means that those each of those polygons, those areas in light black, each of those is a census block. I'm going to go back one slide. When we were zoomed out, notice there weren't as many of those black areas, black polygons. That's because if we look up above at display level, there it was set to the block group. That's where the census has a hierarchy of census tracts, census block groups, and the most detailed, the level we need to work at, are the census blocks. So it will automatically change that as you zoom in and out so that you see the appropriate geography. But this is the geography census blocks that we need to look at when we're assigning blocks to districts. And that's what we're going to do next, because that's this whole set of redistricting tools. And I'm going to show you several of them. We mentioned that Congressional District 1 has about 2,000 more people than 2, which means we need to take some of these census blocks and assign them then to Census District 2 so we can get those populations nearer equal and bring down that total deviation. So you can see a whole set of tools there. First of all, under district, I've set it to Congressional 2 because any blocks that I identify, and I'll show you how to identify them in a moment, I want to make them part of CD2, Congressional District 2. So let's look at the first one. Oh, before we do, we should remember as we're redistricting, there are a whole set of redistricting guidelines that the commission will be following and that members of the public, if they're creating plans, should also follow. Where practicable, we've talked about these in other presentations. Here's a quick summary, not only the total deviation, which is the main number we look at, but also compactness, that they're contiguous, and that they preserve socioeconomic communities. So with that, let's start assigning some census blocks. So the first tool I'm going to show you is just basically a click tool. You click on a block and it will change that block to the district that you've chosen. So I've chosen District 2 up above Congressional 2. So on the map, I've pointed an arrow. That's where I'm going to go click using this tool. And it'll just be a single click. We can see the color changes. So that census block has now been assigned to Congressional District 2. And if we look down below, we see the deviation percent. There was a small number of people in that census block that brought the population a little more into balance. Instead of 0.6, we've brought our total deviation down to 0.56. So that's one of the tools. I want to kind of move across and show you some of the other ones. So I'm going to do this in pieces. The next tool, which is actually one that I use a lot, is the select by rectangle. So in this case, rather than just a single click, you're going to do a double click. And so the first click will be the upper corner of the rectangle. The second click will be the lower corner of the rectangle. So here I'm going to draw a rectangle using this as my active tool around this area, which will then identify all the census blocks that touch that rectangle and assign them to Congressional 2, since that's our district that we've chosen up above. So I'll go ahead and do that. Once again, we see the colors change. And down below, we see our deviation has gotten even better. Now the excess population in Congressional 1 is only 1,000 over the ideal. And that total deviation is down to 0.3%. So that's the rectangle tool. Let's continue looking at the tools. The next one over is select by polygon. So sometimes it's an irregular shape, not just a rectangle that you want to select all the blocks in there. So in this particular case, I'm going to draw a polygon. And this is where, again, I choose that as my tool. I click on each of the corners, each of the vertices of my polygon. And when I'm at the last one, I'm going to double click. And as soon as I double click, once again, I'll see the colors on the map change because those blocks are now assigned to CD2. And then we look down to the deviations and we look and we say, oh, that it's still 0.3, but look what happened. We actually took out too many. Now it's the opposite case. Before, congressional one still had a surplus about 1,000 over. Now it's 1,000 below. So maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And that's where these tools are good, because you can try things. If it's not good, that is another button in here that's quite useful, because I'm seeing my deviations are going like this. Okay, maybe I'd better use, yes, indeed, there is an undo button. I click the undo button and it undoes that last change. You can keep on going back until you last save the plan and do undo and redo. I just did one undo, so now we're back to where there's still about 1,000 people in Congressional District 1, about 1,000 over that ideal population. So I'm looking at the map here, and I can see on the map Ko'olina, and it looks like we've kind of split it in two here. And again, that's one of our guidelines, is not to split communities in two. So I am going to use that rectangle tool, and I see where it says Ko'olina Golf Club. I'm going to use a rectangle tool to grab a few more of those, but not that kind of separate area up above. And indeed, I see now, I'm like, whoa, that really made a difference. My total deviation is down to 0.08%. We only have, our District 1 is only 300 above that ideal population. This is looking pretty good, but it actually still looks like we've split that Ko'olina community. So I'm going to show you one more tool here. And this is the line tool, or polyline tool. And here, similar to the polygon, rather than doing an entire polygon, we just do a line, but it can have multiple vertices. So I'll click at each one of the corners, each one of the vertices. And when I'm done, I'll double click. And as soon as I double click, I'll see those districts change. And now I have included all the census blocks that cover Ko'olina. And look at that, my deviation is even better. Now we're down to just under 200 additional in Congressional District 1 and just 200 under, for a total deviation of 0.06%. That is pretty darn good. And in fact, if I go back compare, that's even lower than their final plan. So I like this, but I need to check some things, right? So, but before I do, I want to save this as my old plan, because right now I'm still working with that template plan that I started with, which I can't save changes to that, right? That's the template that everyone uses. So I need to use Save As. So I've gone back to the File tab, and I'm going to click Save As. I'm going to make this my own plan. So with Save As, I'm going to give it a name. I call it Congressional Ko'olina to CD2. This congressional plan improves the total plan deviation 0.06% by moving blocks around Ko'olina from CD1 to CD2. Okay, and then I click the OK button. And I see that I notice up on top, the name of the plan has changed. It is now my plan, Congressional Ko'olina to CD2. And I can continue working on it if I want. But I might want to, before I do anything else, check the integrity, run some of these checks, like looking for deviation and other things. So I click in the review tab, I can click check integrity. It'll go through and do a number of checks for us, including a maximum deviation check and a bunch of others. If it does not pass some of them, you can click a details button or a zoom to button. But in this case, everything looks good. I'll just click the X and close that window. So it's passed those tests. I may want to still share it with some other people, get their feedback on it, but maybe I'm ready right now. I like my plan. I want to submit it to the commission for their consideration. And I'm going to move over to the submit tab, where there is really only one tool, one button, and that is the submit plan button. So before you click that, again, keep in mind these guidelines, the plan, the reapportionment, Hawaii redistricting, reapportionment redistricting will follow these guidelines. The commission's plans will, and plans from the public should, wherever practicable, follow these same guidelines. And when we submit, in fact, those same integrity checks that we did before in the review tab, as soon as you say, I want to submit my plan, it will run those same integrity checks. And if it does not pass one of them, you cannot yet submit the plan. You'll have to go back in and fix things using those tools that I showed you. But if everything passed, and we know it will because we already checked, then we go ahead and click the OK button to continue submitting our plan. So here it will ask, so it knows your name. You can change it if you want, but that's by default, put your username and use your email. The plan name is the one you gave it. And this is an important part to fill in, explanation of the plan objectives. Why did you do this plan the way you did? And in this case, my objective to lower the total deviation by moving blocks from Coalina from CD1 to CD2, and we lowered it to 0.06%. This is very helpful as the commission is reviewing these plans submitted from the public. These explanations can really help as we're looking at those plans and comparing them with the commission's plans and other plans submitted by the public. So once you've filled in this information, you go ahead and click Submit Plan. At that point, it wants to make sure. So if you're sure you want to submit it, you're going to click OK, because once you submit it, it's locked in place, because the commission then will need to review it and start working on it, comparing it to other plans. So we can't have it changing during that process. So as soon as you click OK here, your plan is going to be locked, cannot be changed. And so I clicked OK. Now it tells me my plan's been submitted. If you want to continue making changes, use Save As to create a copy. So I'll go ahead and click OK, which takes me back to my map. So if I want to continue exploring and try to make something even better, which would probably be pretty hard, but you never know, then I would click Save As, and this would become, I give it a new name, and I could continue working with that plan. So that's a tour of the main tools you need to create a plan, review that plan, and if you want, submit it to the commission. There is one more tool that I do find handy, and that is back on the Create tab. There's a base map tool, and you can change the base map. There's a number of different base maps you can use. I find the imagery one, which I've chosen here, quite useful, particularly if I'm zoomed in and I'm looking at an area and I don't want to split a community, or I don't want a boundary going through a ridge line, or various different reasons. I'm trying to follow the guidelines. Sometimes the imagery is quite helpful as you're trying to understand the geography of an area and draw appropriate boundaries. And so with that, I've shown you the basics of these tools for Hawaii Redistricting Online. How do you create your account? Use plan templates, the map window, the districts window, the big one, assigning census blocks, and then sharing, reviewing, and submitting your plans. Enjoy. We look forward to seeing the plans that everyone comes up with. Mahalo.
That's great. Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the demonstration? I just had one question. It said that the maps would be available September 10th. So I assume that was a recording. And so that
yes, exactly right. This first video we just saw, we made back in early September, right? As soon as we had the congressional data, we still had to wait for the permanent resident base before we could get the other information online. It is now online. It did go up on September 10th. And that is in fact what is being used. So yeah, the Kauai house information I showed you, it's up there. It's online. It is available now. Yeah, thanks for catching that.
Thank you. Thanks.
The other difference I guess I would add also in this particular video, when we zoomed into the census blocks, you could see the outlines. If you recall where I showed you Kauai, you could also see the population numbers. We didn't know how to do that back in September, right? The application was new. We've been adding more features to it as time goes on. And so that's where now when you go zoom in, you will see those population numbers inside each block, which really helps as you're trying to figure out what you want to do, you kind of know beforehand if you're going to be affecting a lot of people or just a few people. And that is in the second video. I provide additional information like that and some of the other new features that we have added since almost a month ago now, since early September.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, any questions? Okay, let's
Nina.
move on. Yes.
Just a point of information. The Reapportionment Commission has a technical group that has been working on drafts for district boundary changes. And David, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, they will be providing this information at the next reapportionment meeting to everyone. And we could request those maps be provided to the advisory council so that you can review them in addition and see whether you want to make any changes as well. Or, just go with their recommendations or what, or even, stay as is for now. But I just thought I would provide that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe some of you have been watching the full commission meeting, so that's been helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 5, which is the current update and status report by the reapportionment staff.
I think-
Before you do that, I think they had a
Yes.
second video. Were you guys gonna show us
that-
a second video for the demonstration or?
Yeah, we do have a second video of updated information. I don't know if that's the same agenda item, but this second video is the updated information in terms of what we've updated on the website. I don't know if David, was there additional information you were going to give as part of that?
No, I think Randy covered what we're going to do. We're going to present the proposed plans on the 14th.
The October
And-
14th meeting of the commission, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm
So yeah,
assuming
thank you.
that
There
the
is the second
second-
video.
the second video is part 5 of the agenda. Item 5 of the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, okay. Hey,
David will cue
let's-
it up. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about learning resources for Hawaii redistricting online. Hawaii redistricting online is a powerful application with data and tools to support redistricting in Hawaii. These data and tools are being used by the Hawaii Reapportionment Commission for their redistricting, and the same data, the same tools are available for members of advisory councils and members of the public who wish to draw their own redistricting plans. So before we jump into these learning resources, just a bit of background on the use of computers in redistricting. Back in the 60s was when computers first started being used, IBM mainframe systems. Through the 70s, there was some use. In the 1980s, the Rose Institute, that's the photo here. They were one of the early pioneers in using computers for redistricting. By 1990, computers were being used a lot. Here in Hawaii, I was not involved with the project, but I've seen the notes. It was done on mainframe computers in the basement of Kalani Moku. Average cost of those computers, $500,000. By the year 2000, so 20 years ago, there were a number of commercial tools, Maptitude, Autobound, and in fact, Autobound is the one. I was supporting the commission at that time, and we did use Autobound, which was a desktop tool, pretty much a GIS mapping tool, not that user-friendly, but it did have the tools for redistricting, which were very powerful. And the commission, knowing that the public could get copies of Autobound if they wanted, did share its data. So the commission's data in 2000 was shared with the public who could go get Autobound and learn Autobound. It didn't happen. The data was shared, but no plans were submitted at that time. I think the software was just still a little too hard to use 20 years ago. Now let's go back. Well, the commission was using that. So here's going back 20 years in the Star Bulletin, a quote from the project manager at that time, David Rosenbrock, our current project manager, also talking about, because the commission did have this powerful technology, that it had the opportunity to make a decision, reconsider that decision based on public testimony, and go back and make changes. Because it does, even without the mapping, submitting of plans online, the public still had opportunity to comment on maps, mostly paper maps that were provided at meetings. But the commission then could go back and did go back and change their plans after they put out for public consideration. So the software did help the commission, but it wasn't so helpful for the public 20 years ago. 10 years ago, it was a different story. Then the first version of Hawaii Redistricting Online was available, was used by the commission, and that same data and tools were made available to the public and the advisory councils to use. And indeed, it was used. Plans were created by the public, submitted, and were shared with the commission, and some lines were changed based on that public submission of plans, and of course, the public testimony at the public hearings. And now today, we do have the current version of Hawaii Redistricting Online. The same company, Esri, has created this. The tools look quite similar. The data, of course, is updated. And there are some new tools in there, and we'll talk about these tools as we go through the learning resources. But these are then the same data and tools that are currently being used by the technical group working on plans. And it is available, and that's what we're going to talk about now for advisory councils and the public. So this is what the opening page of Hawaii Redistricting Online looks like. The URL is down there in the corner. It is available from the Reapportionment Commission page. But before we go jump into that, let's just do a quick review of what's happened up until now. Looking at redistricting and reapportionment in Hawaii. The first step was reapportionment, which required census data. We did receive that census data on August 12th, process that to create two population bases, the federal population base used for the congressional redistricting and the Hawaii permanent resident population base used for apportionment and redistricting for the Hawaii State Senate and State House. Again, those were described in more detail at the August 26th commission meeting. If you want more information, you can go back to the video. The link is online and it's here on the slide. The other thing that has been talked about at the commission meetings, the July 20th meeting, was the various redistricting guidelines. Total deviation, this means the overall plan deviation, the overall range, between districts for the ideal population. Ideally, they're all the same. The reality is you can't always do that. For federal plans, they still need to be less than 1% difference between the highest and lowest. For state Senate and state House, 10% between the highest and the lowest deviation from the ideal. We talked about these again more on the July 20th if you want more information on that. But other important ones are the notion of compactness, that districts should be geometrically compact. There's three little slides here. You can see the first one is, the second one not so much. The third one, they should be geographically compact. And this is an important one that's often overlooked. Here in Hawaii in particular, the ridges are very prominent geographic features that in many places are impassable. You can't cross the ridge. So just like you can't cross the ridge, district boundaries by and large should not cross over ridges. That would, as a measure of geographical compactness. Likewise, there's other guidelines. They should be contiguous. In other words, all parts of a district should be connected to each other, no disconnects, no one-point connections, and wherever possible, preserve socioeconomic communities. Don't split communities into no submergence. The qualifier on all these is where practicable, given our geography, given the shape of census blocks. Sometimes you can't do these as well as you'd like, but these are the guidelines that will be adhered to by the commission. And if anyone else submits a plan for the commission's consideration, they should follow those same guidelines. Again, more details, you can go to the July 20th video from the commission where we presented this in detail. So the learning resources for Hawaii Redistricting Online are available on the reapportionment website. Before we jump into those, just quickly, if you don't want to change a plan, if all you want to do is look at the plan, you can see any plan that's been presented by the technical group. And then later, as plans are proposed for public consideration from the commission as a whole, those will be available as interactive maps and as PDFs that you don't need a login. So right now there's two up there, the two congressional plans that have been presented by the technical group to the commission. You can go look at those without a login. But this presentation is geared for people interested in actually coming up with their own plans. And that's where Hawaii Redistricting Online has the tools for that, but it does require a login. So we will talk about that. When you click the Hawaii Redistricting Online, it opens up to a number of different resources for you. So the first one is the link to the application itself. The URL is down in the corner of all these slides, but you don't need to remember it or write it down. Just go to the reapportionment page and you'll be able to just click this link to start the online application. There's also a video tutorial. This is a 25-minute video that steps through the process of creating a redistricting plan using Hawaii Redistricting Online. At the time the video was made, we only had the congressional data, and so that's the data that's shown in that plan. Since then, we have gotten the data for the state Senate, state House. They have been apportioned, so they are ready for redistricting. There is an addendum to the tutorial that talks in more detail about these plans. The current edition, and what we're going to talk about in these learning resources is what I call a click list. So in the video tutorial, I showed the various steps as you go through redistricting and how to do them. You could see me do it, but you might later be wondering, oh, I remember I saw in the video how he used these redistricting tools, but how did he click? What did he actually do to do that? So that's why I've created these click lists. They show the specific mouse clicks that I used in the video, plus some additional ones that have been added later, some additional information. So these click lists are the learning resources that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. And they basically do cover the steps that you go through in creating your own plan. So you can see those steps up here. The click lists follow those same steps. So when you first open up the application, you'll be dealing with the File tab, talking about template plans. When you first open it, you'll be asked to choose a template plan. After that, you can start working with your own plans, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. The next step in creating a plan is viewing the maps, the district deviations, and then actually assigning districts. This is where you spend most of your time. And today, talking about learning resources, I'll spend most of our time talking specifically a bit about the View tab, but mostly about the Create tab, which is where you change district assignments to create a new plan. There is then the review step where you look at your plan, check it against the guidelines. We'll talk about that. If you want, you can share your plan, or you might be invited by someone else who wants to share their plan. You can do that with groups. We'll talk about that. And finally, if you have a plan that you like and you'd like to submit it for the commission's consideration, there is a submit tab to submit your plan, and we'll talk about that. So going through each one, let's start with click list number one. There's a snippet over there on the right. You can see it's for a new user. And in the click list itself, there's much more detail, but it goes over the step-by-step what to do to create a new user account. You'll create a username, a password, create a question. There's a lot of different steps. They're all summarized in Click List 1. So if you're at that stage, you're not sure what to do, open up Click List 1. It's a PDF, and it'll have those steps for you that you can follow. If you're a returning user, it's pretty simple. You'll use that username and password that you created, and you'll be able to log in to the online application. When you do log in, you'll always be presented with a template plan. We'll talk in a minute how you can then start changing that into your own plan, but you always start by selecting a template plan. There are templates for the 2 congressional districts, and now we do have the templates for the Hawaii State House and State Senate for each basic island unit. And as I talk about in the video, there's 2 versions of these templates, a blank template where no census blocks are assigned, and a current one that's starting from the 2020 boundaries. And that's where we find the commission itself and most people who are working with plans find it best to start with the current districts and then start making adjustments to those current districts. But both are available as templates, and you can choose whichever ones you wish to work with. Also, you can see down at the bottom, there are a couple of templates now for the plans that have been presented to the commission by the technical group. So they have a TG in front for technical group. Later, as the commission itself proposes plans for public consideration, those will also show up here as proposed, and they'll be available for you to look at, and if you want, suggest changes. So you open a template plan that you might want to work with. The first thing to do is to save it as your own plan. And so that's where there's a Save As button on the File tab. You give it a name, you can put a description, that's up to you what you want to put. And then that becomes your plan that you can start making changes using the tools we'll talk about in a moment. But when you come back and open the app later, again, you'll be asked to choose a template. But as soon as you've chosen that template, it'll open up and you can use the File tab to open your own plan, save the plan. You can see the tools that are here. Again, more details are in the actual Click List 4 PDF that you can download and read. Click List 5, now we're moving on to the view and create step, the major step in creating a redistricting plan. So there's a lot that I showed in the video. There's a lot in the Click List itself. I want to highlight a few things that I think are quite important. And that is this first one, there are 2 different ways to view your district, either as filled in districts where they're filled in with color, or as outline districts. So there is a setting there, display lines or fill districts. I'm going to show you a couple more examples just to make this more clear. So here's an example on the left. If you've checked fill districts, you'll see your districts are filled with color. And that's often the easiest way to see the difference between the districts. But sometimes you really want to see that map underneath. You want to see the street names, the park names, the community names. And there it's handy to just display the district boundaries as lines. Then you'll click display lines. And it's easy to go back and forth. But I pointed out because some people do find it very handy to be able to turn off the color and just see that as lines. I should mention the Click List also, you can change the colors, and in the Click List, I describe how to do that. But here, this is the one I thought was important to show, and particularly, you can change the base map. Again, we talk about that in the Click List, but underneath, by default, it's the street base map, but you can also choose an imagery base map. And when you're looking at the imagery, here again, it's very useful to turn on display lines and not see it filled in with color. It really helps see the imagery better. So that's a bit on the View tab. Now we jump into the real heart of redistricting, and that is this Create tab. So there's a series of tools for moving around the window. I've shown a couple of them here. There's more in the Click List. The pan tool is the main one I use. Occasionally I use the zoom in tool, but with the pan tool, I can click and drag my map. So I do use that one quite a bit. But really what I mostly want to do is assign census blocks to districts. So that's what we're going to look at now is the tools to do that. And I want to point out something important that I maybe didn't emphasize enough in the video, but I do want to emphasize it here. And that is this selection level. So you can see I've shown two maps here. The upper one zoomed out to the entire island of Oahu, and it says selection level tracked. Yeah, that means if I was to use some of the tools I'll show you in a minute to select, I wouldn't be selecting census blocks. I'd be selecting tracks, which are very large and it can get very confusing. So when I'm using the districting tools, I'll show you in a moment, I don't use them at tracked. If you zoom in, you'll get down to the block group level. Even that I find can be quite confusing because again, block groups are larger than blocks. What we want to do is zoom in. This is what I have found most useful. Zoom in to where the selection level is block. That means when you use a tool and you select something on the map, it will be selecting a census block. And you can see them here on the map itself. The black outlines, each of those is a census block, and the number inside shows the population within that census block. So there are times you want to kind of zoom out and see the pattern, but don't do redistricting tools at that level. Make sure you're zoomed in to the selection level block. So with that, you can jump over to the tools. The simplest tool is the pick tool, which just means I want to pick one census block and I want to change it. So in this case, I'm going to want to change it to 47. So I chose the district as house 47. That means when I click on my map, whichever census block I click on will get assigned to house district 47. So there's more details on that in both the video and the click list. But I do use that tool more frequently, though I find the rectangle tool handy to use because I can select more than one at a time. I can click and drag a rectangle and select multiple census blocks. Again, I make sure my selection level is block, and then I'll select multiple census blocks to assign them to the district. In this case, it would be 47. As I'm changing those assignments, I'm watching the district window down below and checking my district population and how much it deviates from the ideal or the target. I can see in this case, 47 is 4.78% below. So I might want to continue doing some work here to try to get that even better. So I'm always watching that, and I'm always going kind of back and forth, right? So I'm using the pan tool to move my map around, and then I'm using usually the rectangle tool to assign districts. I assign some districts. I want to move my map a little bit. I go over and click the pan tool. It gets the little orange outline around it, which shows it's active. I move my map. Then I go back and choose the rectangle tool, change some more blocks, and I go back and forth between these. But I'll tell you what happens to me sometimes still, and it'll probably happen to you. You'll think you've grabbed the pan tool, but in fact, you have the rectangle tool still there. And when you go click on your map and think you're going to move the map, instead you assign a bunch more census blocks. And it's like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. In which case you'll be very happy to learn about this tool, the undo button. This is the other one I use a lot. I've changed a set of blocks and it's like, whoa, my deviations just got real bad. I'll click the undo button and it'll undo that change. If I click it again, it'll undo the previous change all the way back until the last time I saved. And I do find it useful to save my plan every so often while I'm working. And so that's the undo. And the various tools. There is another tool that I want to share with you. And this one we've updated. So in the map contents, there's a little circle with a triangle inside up in the upper corner by the plus and minus zoom in, zoom out buttons. If you click that button, it opens up the map contents. And what that is, there's a number of additional reference layers, and these have recently been updated that you might find handy as you're coming up with your plan. So you've started to assign some blocks. Your district boundaries are different than the existing ones. You'd like to see the existing ones. In this case, we're in the State House. We could go click the little empty box and it'll turn green check mark, and we'll see the State House 2020 lines on our map. You may want to refer to Ahupua'a. Again, you can check that box. You'll see Ahupua'a lines. Elementary school layers are sometimes useful to refer to. And if you're on Oahu, you will see the Oahu neighborhood boards. You can turn these on and off by opening this map contents window. Once you've turned them on or off, you can click that arrow to the left and it will close it back so you can see the full map. So that is the map contents. As I mentioned, it has recently been updated to add those additional layers that people sometimes find useful as reference layers. So now you've been working, you've got a new plan, you want to review to make sure it meets all the guidelines. You're going to move to the review tab. And for your plan, you want to check the integrity. The application itself will check a number of different things. One of the key ones is the deviation check. In fact, the overall range check is the key one. That's where I had mentioned earlier, 1% for congressional plans, 10% for state Senate and state House plans. This is the overall range between your highest deviation and your lowest deviation. So when you're working on some of the basic island units, like on Kauai, there's 3. It's not that hard to see in the district window, the highest and lowest. But you're working on Oahu, there's 35. It's not easy to see in the district window. But if you can go run the integrity test, it'll quickly check your overall range. And if it's beyond 10%, as was the case here, you'll see a red X and you'll want to go click the details button. Again, I talk more in detail about this. I give more information in the click list itself on how to use that details button. But this is a very key check. The other ones that are important are the null assignment check and connectivity checks. Every census block must be assigned, and the application will check for that. If there's a red X, then click the zoom to. And connectivity also is the important one, that all census blocks in your district are connected. If that one has a red X, click the details button. And as I mentioned before, within the click list itself is more information about how to handle those when you see errors like that in your plan. So you've gone in, you fix things, or maybe you want some help, you want to share your plan with others, or maybe you've invited to join a group and share, someone else wants to share their plan with you. There is a share tab where you can accept invitations to join other groups or create your own group and invite people to share. Each of these groups is private. Only you and the other members of the group can see the plans that you're working on. So again, this is totally optional. If you just want to develop your own plan, you can. But if you do want to share it with a group, you would use the share tab to do that. Finally, you've got everything ready to go. Your integrity checks have checked. You've passed the redistricting guidelines. You have a plan you'd like the commission to consider. Then you move on to the submit tab, which has just one button, submit plan. It'll ask you to describe your plan and do a number of things that are described in more detail in the click list itself. But that is the final step then in creating a plan and sharing it with the commission. So we've gone over a number of learning resources to use Hawaii Redistricting Online. I should add one more. I've summarized these because these are the ones that I've found most useful in the work I've done with redistricting and supporting the commission. But there are a lot of other tools in Hawaii Redistricting Online. And that's the one tab I didn't talk about. That's the Learn tab. Here on the Learn tab, you can find the same information. I put the click lists up there, the video, the introductory video. But there's also, if you want to learn more about all the other tools that are in the app, Esri does have, Esri is a company that has created this application. They do have detailed online help that you can get to from the Learn tab. But for our purposes here, as I mentioned, these are the most common tools that I find most useful, that I've created the video tutorial for and the set of click lists for, that I think will be the useful learning resources to help you use Hawaii redistricting online and create your own redistricting plan. Aloha. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Maybe
there
more
any
than you
que-
ever wanted to know, but I'm trying to cover all the bases of what I've really found useful. So yeah, I'm ready if there's any questions on what you've seen.
Okay, no questions? So I guess there was a little bit of a mix-up. So both tutorials were related to agenda item 4. And so now we're on agenda item 5, which is the current update and status report by the reapportionment staff.
Oh, I'm ready to give one.
Okay, great. Thank you, David.
We're gonna present the proposed plans on the 14th of October. They'll not take any action on those until later in the month. When they have proposed plans, there is a 20-day review period for public review and comment. And then they'll proceed to develop the final plan. Just, I did want to say this, the commission very early on decided that they, as one of their standards, they would not have any canoe districts. So we're not going to revisit canoe district anymore, which I'm sure Ms. Morita will be happy about.
Yep.
Yeah. When we produce the proposed plan, we are required to place those plans like in the library or places where folks who don't have computers can go look at great big maps of the proposed plan. And those will be there at the beginning of the 20-day review period.
Okay.
I think that's all the surprises I have.
Okay, council members, any questions for either David or Royce?
I have a question. This is Laurie Yoshida. If we want to propose a plan, and I'm not saying we do or we don't at this point, but we don't know yet, we need to submit it to, do we have a deadline? Does it need to be a certain time before the 14th?
No, not before the 14th. In fact, not before the commission adopts a proposed plan. Like I said, that'll be toward the end of October. And then there's the 20-day review period, which gets us pretty close to Thanksgiving. So I imagine that the 20 days might slip to more like 30 days. But we're required to give at least 20. And in that period of time, we're hoping that folks that are interested in submitting a plan will get their stuff together and submit it. And then when the commission goes back, or the technical group goes back together, they'll take into account all of the comments and suggestions that both the public and the council members provide, and see how that affects their plan to turn into a final plan.
Okay, so sometime in the month of November is what you're anticipating.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So just for clarification, the October 14th meeting, the next reapportionment commission meeting, is that when the technical committee presents their proposed plans?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's move on to item number 6, which is public testimony. I don't believe we received any written testimony. Is there anyone online wanting to provide oral testimony? Okay, hearing none. The last item is adjournment. Before we adjourn, so I guess for the advisory committee members, we probably won't have another meeting until after October 14th, when we can probably review anything proposed by the technical committee for Kauai at that time, before we move forward.
So do we want to set a meeting now, or we're just gonna try to find a date that's feasible for everybody?
I think better we wait until after the 14th. And, you know, if we don't see any issues coming up, it could be a really quick meeting. But if we do, we may want to set aside more time. So probably take a temperature check after the 14th on what kind of meeting we would want moving forward, depending on how easy or complicated the Kauai proposals are. What do you all think?
Mina,
Yes,
Mina,
yes,
this
Randy.
is Randy. I'll
Mhm.
put you in touch with the apportionment staff and they'll assist you with the nuts and bolts for putting everything together.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And then, yeah, and then Lyndon is already, he's also supporting us. So, you know,
Okay,
that'll help a lot as well.
great. Thank you. And so I just want to thank everybody for, especially the commission members, knowing how busy you all are, for joining us today, and for the staff for walking us through the software. And really appreciate all the help that you're giving us, and thanks, Commissioner Nishimura, for setting this up for us today. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Chris. And mahalo. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Uh,
Thank you.